Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are wrestling with a problem that, honestly, it feels a little bit like that junk drawer everyone has in their kitchen. You know the one I'm talking about?
Oh, everyone has one.
Right. It's that drawer where you have all this, objectively useful stuffed batteries that might or might not work, rolls of tape, that specific Allen key you need once every 3 years.
For a bookshelf you don't even remember buying.
Exactly. It's all in there. It's useful, but it's just sort of thrown in. It's a mess.
It is chaos.
Total chaos. And when you actually need that Allen key, you're digging around, cursing under your breath, hoping you can find it before the IKEA shelf collapses.
That is a surprisingly painful and accurate metaphor for what we're talking about.
I thought so, because today we are talking about expertise in government, specifically the uncomfortable place we find ourselves in regarding where that expertise actually lives.
Right.
We've got this fascinating stack of notes on the case for a parliamentary expert bench, and it starts with a premise that really hit me. We rely on expertise and institutional memory way more than we admit. We know we need it.
Oh, absolutely.
But we treat it like that junk drawer.
We do. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's really about this tension between stability and, well, chaos. When you have deep expertise involved in making laws, people who remember why the plumbing was installed that way 20 years ago, things generally work. The lights stay on, but when it's missing, we notice immediately. The systems break, the laws don't land right. You get these unintended consequences spiraling out, and 6 months later, everyone is standing around the wreckage wondering, how did nobody see this coming?
How did nobody see this coming? I feel like that could be the epitaph for so many failed policies. But here's the kicker, and this is where the junk drawer analogy really lands. The source points out, we have never actually decided where this expertise should live. We haven't designed a home for it. Instead, the source argues it has just sort of drifted. It's drifted into the House of Lords.
Because that was the path of least resistance. It wasn't some strategic choice. Nobody sat down in a room with a whiteboard and said, okay, the House of Lords shall be the central repository of all technical knowledge.
Right. Not a master plan.
Not at all. It just became the easiest place for it to end up. By default, you retire a prominent scientist, make them appear, you need a senior doctor involved.
Put them in the Lords.
Put them in the Lords. It's a convenient dumping ground for smart people.
So the status quo is, well, it's basically accidental. We have experts, sure, but they're there because they happen to end up there, not because we built a specific engine to generate that advice. It's luck.
Precisely. And relying on luck is not a strategy for governance. Which brings us to the mission for this deep dive. We are not talking about burning down Parliament and starting over.
No.
This is not a grand redesign or some kind of, technocratic takeover where the scientist seize the mace.
Which is a relief, because frankly, I don't think scientists want the mace. They're busy.
They definitely do not want the mace. Instead, we're looking at a proposal for something cleaner and more intentional. The source calls it a parliamentary expert bench.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because whenever I hear cleaner and more intentional in a government context, my skepticism radar pings a little. It sounds like a consultant's PowerPoint.
Sure.
But to understand what this bench actually is, the source takes a really interesting detour. It goes to the corporate world.
It does.
Now, usually I get a bit twitchy when people compare government to business. Run the country like a business is a cliche that misses the point that democracy isn't about profit.
Right.
But here, the source insists there's a specific structural lesson to be learned.
It is a useful comparison as long as you look at the right part of the business. If you look at large private sector organizations, PLCs, huge multinationals, they face a very similar problem. They have executive leadership that changes.
Right. CEOs get fired, the C-suite moves around, new strategies come in every quarter.
Exactly. So how do they handle continuity? How do they make sure they aren't just relying on whoever happens to be the boss that morning?
They use boards.
Right. But we need to be really specific about who is on those boards. They use non-executive directors.
NEDs.
NEDs.
Okay, stop there. Non-executive director. I think a lot of people hear director, and they assume these are the people shouting orders, firing people, demanding higher stock prices.
And that is exactly what they don't do. That's the crucial distinction. Non-executive directors, they don't manage staff. They don't write operational plans. They aren't in the trenches doing the day-to-day work. They aren't executing anything, hence, the name.
But they aren't running the company. What are they actually for? Why are they on the payroll?
Their value lies in memory and pattern recognition. They are there because they have seen similar situations before. They understand how complex systems behave over time. Their job is to look at a plan that looks perfectly tidy on paper, a plan the CEO is incredibly excited about, and say, hold on, I've seen this movie before. If you pull that lever 3 years from now, the engine falls out.
That's a really powerful image, tidy on paper. Because legislation often looks beautiful on paper, doesn't it? It has a catchy name, it promises to fix the problem, the polling looks good, it's all very neat.
And then it meets the real world.
Yeah.
Exactly. In the corporate world, the NED is the designated adult in the room who isn't caught up in the hype. They spot the risks that the operational team, they might miss because they are so hyper-focused on this quarter's target.
A short horizon.
A very short horizon. The NED provides a challenge function based on a much longer one.
A challenge function. So the insight here is that government has this exact same need, maybe even more so. We have incredibly complex systems, healthcare, energy, defense, and leaders who are focused on the immediate now.
The next election, the daily news cycle.
But unlike the private sector, we don't have a structured place for those non-executive directors to sit.
It's missing. That function, that role of the experienced, detached observer, it doesn't sit inside Parliament in any formal, structured way.
Right. It happens by accident or sporadically, or you hire expensive consultants who leave once the check clears.
But it's not designed into the legislative anatomy.
So enter the expert bench, or the ALB bench, arm's length body bench, as the source sometimes calls it. And we should probably define that because arm's length body is proper Whitehall jargon.
It is. An ALB is just a public agency that has some independence from the government of the day. Think of like the Environment Agency or the Office for Budget Responsibility. The state funds them, but ministers don't tell them what to do day to day. The proposal here is to take that concept of independence and stick it right inside the legislative process.
So if we take this corporate NED idea and paste it onto Parliament, what are we actually building? What does this bench do on a Tuesday afternoon?
Well, first we have to define what it's focused on. The source is very clear. This is not about control. It is about perspective.
Perspective over control. I like that.
The core task of this bench would be to look at legislation that affects long-running systems. Not every single bill. They aren't going to debate naming a post office. But the bills that tweak the engines of how the country works.
Got it.
And they would ask a very simple but very difficult question. What tends to happen when rules like this meet reality?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What happens when rules meet reality?
It is. Because writing a rule is easy. Understanding how that rule interacts with human behavior or existing IT infrastructure or budget cycles over 10 years, that's hard. The bench would be responsible for flagging those risks.
Right. It's about spotting the blind spots. Because if you're a politician, your focus is, I need to get this bill passed. You're thinking about the vote count, the messaging. You have tie vision.
And that's a necessary part of politics. You need that drive. If you stop to think about every possible contingency, you'd never pass anything. But that tunnel vision is dangerous. The expert bench is focused on the consequences of that law 5 years down the road. They draw attention to the things that are easy to miss in the heat of the moment.
But let's play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
I can hear some listeners thinking, how do they actually change anything? If they aren't in charge, if they can't vote, do they just write a strongly worded letter and go home? We have so many reports in government that nobody reads.
That's a valid fear. The source notes a specific style of influence here. It's not about issuing orders. It's about being visible and persistent.
Visible and persistent, meaning they don't just file a report and vanish.
Exactly. Think about it like this. If you have a group of respected experts who sit there day after day openly stating, this won't work because of X, or you really need to consider why, they build a record, a public record.
So it's almost like a black box recorder for legislation.
A bit of both. It creates accountability. If the government ignores the bench and then the system breaks exactly how the bench said it would, well, that matters. It changes the political dynamic.
They can't claim ignorance later.
Exactly. It forces decision makers to be more thoughtful because they know there's a credible voice on the record pointing out the flaws. It prevents the nobody told us excuse.
It raises the political cost of being incompetent.
That's the lever. It sounds passive reviewing, questioning. But in practice, that friction can be incredibly powerful.
Okay, but I want to address the elephant in the room. Whenever we talk about unelected experts in government, people get nervous. And honestly, they should.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, there's a legitimate fear of a deep state or technocrats taking over. We vote for people to make decisions, not to have some professor tell us we can't have what we voted for.
Absolutely.
So let's bust some myths. The source is very specific about what this bench is not.
This is critical. To make this work and to make it democratic, you have to be explicitly clear about the limits. So let's run down the won't-do list. First, the expert bench would not have executive authority.
So they can't launch a program, they can't spend money.
Correct. Zero spending power. They cannot write a check. Second, they would not issue instructions to departments. They can't call up the Department of Health and tell them how to run hospitals.
Okay, that's a big one. They aren't running the show from behind the curtain.
Third, and this is probably the most important one for the democracy argument,
Yeah.
they would not veto legislation. They cannot stop a bill from becoming law.
That's huge. So if Parliament is absolutely determined to pass a law that the experts say is going to crash the system,
They can still pass it. The bench can scream from the rooftops. They can write reports in red ink. They can go on television and explain why it's a disaster, but they cannot block the vote.
and finally,
Finally, they wouldn't be there to micromanage agencies or public bodies. They aren't the managers. They are the inspectors.
so no veto, no orders, no managing.
No. The source uses a defining summary here that I think is really important. Their role is to review, question, and explain, not decide.
Review, question, and explain, not decide. I feel like that should be tattooed on the forehead of every consultant. Here, it's structurally built in.
And if we ask, so what? Why does this distinction matter so much?
Yeah.
It brings us back to the core of democracy. The goal isn't to shift power away from elected representatives.
You want them to make the decisions.
We want them to own the success, and we want them to own the failure.
Right. We don't want the experts running the country. We want the experts advising the people running the country.
Precisely. The goal is to ensure that those elected representatives make their decisions with a clearer understanding of the complex systems they are touching. It's about informed consent, really.
Informed consent.
You can still make the risky choice. You can still choose to ignore the engineering constraints for political reasons. But you can't say you weren't warned. You have to look the expert in the eye and say, I hear you, and I'm doing it anyway.
It reminds me of, it's like when you're buying a house. You hire an inspector. The inspector tells you, hey, the foundation is cracked and the roof is leaking. The inspector doesn't decide if you buy the house. You can still buy it. But now you know what you're getting into. You aren't buying a money pit by accident.
That is a perfect analogy. Currently, Parliament is often buying the house without the inspection report. Or, even worse, the report exists, but it's buried in a pile of paperwork in the Lord's Library that nobody read.
Right.
The expert bench puts that report right on the table in bold text before the check is signed.
Okay, so structurally, I get it. We know what it is, we know what it isn't. But we still have to figure out where it lives.
Yeah.
We started this talking about the House of Lords.
Yeah.
And anyone who follows politics knows that House of Lords reform is the zombie topic that never dies. Is this proposal basically saying, let's fire everyone in the Lords and replace them with this bench?
Not at all. And this is where the proposal shows its flexibility. The source material argues that this idea does not depend on any specific model of Lord's reform.
So it's compatible with whatever mess we currently have or whatever future we dream up.
Yes. It could sit in a reformed appointed chamber. It could exist alongside elected members in a mixed house. Maybe you have 80% elected senators and 20% expert bench.
Uh-huh.
Or it could be a clearly defined subset mapped onto the House of Lords as it exists today.
So it's a module. You can plug it into different operating systems.
Exactly. And the expert puts a fine point on why this is important. This idea isn't about the arguments of legitimacy or democracy.
Those are the arguments we usually have about the Lords. Who elected you? Why do you have the right to speak?
Right. And those are valid, huge constitutional questions that need to be addressed. But this proposal is strictly about capacity. It's asking a functional question. Does Parliament want a reliable way to hear from people who understand long systems?
It's separating the who should rule question from the how do we get good advice question.
Yes. It's saying, regardless of how we structure the power, we need this capacity for memory and technical understanding. We shouldn't rely on who happens to be there by accident.
Who happens to be there by accident? That brings us full circle to the junk drawer. Right now, we might get lucky. We might have a world-class scientist in the Lords just because they happen to get a peerage.
Maybe we have a former general who understands logistics perfectly, but we can't count on it. And relying on luck is not a strategy. You wouldn't run a bakery on luck, let alone a G7 economy.
So if we do this, does it fix the House of Lords?
No. And the source is honest about that. It doesn't magically fix the arguments about election versus appointment. It doesn't settle the size of the House.
It's not a silver bullet.
It's not. But it offers a way to separate experience from authority.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me. The idea that we can value memory without giving it the keys to the kingdom. We can recognize that knowing how things work is valuable without pretending that memory should rule.
That is the core philosophy. In a democracy, the people with the authority must be the ones chosen by the voters. That's non-negotiable.
Right.
But the people with the experience, the ones who remember why the fence was built in the first place, they need a voice. Currently, that voice is muffled or accidental. The bench amplifies it, clarifies it, but strictly keeps it in its lane.
It sounds so sensible. Which is probably why it hasn't happened. Common sense has a hard time in Westminster.
Perhaps. But it's also about shifting from default to design.
Tell me more about that. That feels like a big philosophical shift.
Well, the source material ends on this idea of choice. For years, decades even, we've been answering the question of where expertise belongs by default. It drifted to the Lords because we didn't know where else to put it.
We let gravity do the work. We let the junk accumulate in the drawer.
We did. But if we were to answer that question deliberately, if we sat down and designed the machine today, would we choose to place it inside the Lords? Would we place it alongside it? Or would we put it somewhere else entirely?
It opens up the floor. It stops us from just accepting this is how it is and asks, is this how we want it?
And that is a very empowering shift. It moves us from passive observers of a drifting system to active architects of a better one.
I love that. And, looking back at the corporate analogy, no successful company runs on accidental advice. They structure it. They pay for it. They define the roles clearly.
Exactly. The NED knows they aren't the CEO. The CE knows they aren't the NED. In Parliament, those lines are blurry. The bench would sharpen them.
Sharpening the lines. I think that's a great takeaway. We aren't talking about adding more noise. We're talking about adding signal.
A dedicated signal for long-term reality checking.
So as we wrap up, I'm thinking about that listener who might be frustrated with how short-term everything feels in politics. Feels like we're always reacting, never planning. We're fighting fires, not preventing them.
And this proposal speaks directly to that frustration. It's an attempt to build a long-term brain into a short-term body.
A long-term brain in a short-term body. That is a fantastic image.
It's necessary. Because the challenges we face, climate change, AI regulation, aging demographics, these are long systems. They operate on 30 or 50-year arcs. They don't operate on 4-year election cycles.
Right.
If our institutions only think in 4-year chunks, we will fail to manage 30-year problems. It's a temporal mismatch.
The temporal mismatch. That's a scary thought.
It is. But the expert bench is a mechanism to bridge that gap, to force the short-term body to acknowledge the long-term reality.
It's really about equipping our democracy to handle complexity. It's not about taking power away from the people. It's about making sure the people's representatives aren't flying blind.
Precisely. It's a safety mechanism. It's the dashboard warning light. You can ignore it, but at least you saw it flash.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground, from the junk drawer of the status quo to the corporate boardroom, to the specific limits of what this bench would actually do.
And hopefully we've demystified the idea. It's not a shadowy cabal. It's a committee of inspectors checking the foundation.
I like that. So here's the final thought for you listening right now. The source material leaves us with the question of design versus default. We have been answering the question of where expertise belongs by default for years. It just ends up where it ends up.
But the opportunity now is to choose.
Exactly. If we were to answer it deliberately, right now, starting from a blank page, would we choose to place it inside the Lords? Would we build it alongside the Lords? Or would we put it somewhere else entirely?
It's a question of where the memory of the system should sit.
The question is now open for you to consider. Thanks for diving in with us.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.